Library, I'd like to welcome you all to this author talk with Perryburg author Randy Becker in conversation with Ira Jo Fisher, the poet laureate of Richfield. I would like to thank our amazing local bookstore, Books on the Common, for being here tonight with books available for purchase and signing after the program. Thank you very much, gentlemen. And
Cool.
We even have some M&Ms here. Do you have M&Ms in the audience?
No, I heard a story about you, Ira,
About M&Ms?
about peanut M&Ms, and so I thought you needed these.
Well, you're very kind. Okay, we might as well tell the story.
Yeah.
I was on a board, and they had board meetings. The keyword is board. And I would show up to the meetings, I had nothing whatever to contribute to the meeting. I mean, nothing. They talked about finances and intelligent things. Anyway, across the table was a big bowl of M&M peanuts, and it was making its way from person to person around the table. And I'm thinking, it won't be long before I'll be eating M&Ms. And the M&M bowl stopped 3 people away from me. Well, I resigned from that board. I'm looking forward to this conversation with this wonderful author. And I have gone from friend to fan, including friend, with Randy Becker and his wonderful book, Perryburg. It is a remarkable accomplishment, and I naively thought that you had attributions to actual living human beings to get the thing started. And you don't. It's all fiction.
Except for the parts that aren't.
That's what I think.
We
Well,
can talk about that.
Well, let us.
Okay, I refer to it more as an artistic representation, an artistic urban mosaic history, which says that you talk about the history of a place through the lives of people. You look at the mosaic of the people that make it up. That most cities are really not comprised of buildings or streets or other things, but out of lives. Artistic because there may be a few people in there that relate to human beings that exist, and there are a lot that don't. You often talk about in class, though, there's one thing as fact and another as truth. There are few facts in here. I hope there are many truths.
Oh,
And that the truths will come out through the lives and the eyes of the individuals that you read about. So that's the point of the book, is to see if you can discern the nature of a place you know through lives you didn't know, but now that you know them, you realize they're familiar. And therefore the city is probably familiar too.
well, it is a wonderful piece of writing, and it's captured in the very title, Perryburg, an autobiography of a city, not the autobiography of a city. I like that distinction, and it captivated me right out of the chute. But let's talk for a moment about you, Randy Becker, human being. You are a minister, and well, you were born near Utica, New York.
I was actually so near Utica, I was in Utica. I was
No
born.
kidding.
In the city limits.
All right, well, which is, Utica is kind of a suburb of Little Valley, New York.
Right. Where Ira grew up.
But you so beautifully capture that part of New York. We call it, well, here we call it upstate New York, but it's really central and western New York. Completely different complexion than this part of New York
Yes.
that we live near. But let's talk about your ministerial work. And you have written, I need to point this out, reclaiming the soul of your faith before you turned to fiction. Randy, why would you leave writing about theology and philosophy and enter the world of fiction? Why would you do that?
Well, now wait a minute, you're assuming that theology is not fiction. So be careful there.
I'm worried about lightning now.
That book, and there's a copy of it back there, one of my earlier books, talks about the way that most people's faith had been stolen from them. and I give 10 polarities. You know, is your faith open or closed? Is it forward-looking or backward-looking? Things like that. And suggesting that if you see that you keep going on the side that's limited, backward-looking, and that, probably all your optimism, all your faith has been stolen from you, and that's the reclaiming. That's what that book was about. But at the same time I was writing that book, I was living in Venice, Venezia, Italia, in Venice, Italy, on a sabbatical. And there's a companion book that I was writing, which is all fiction.
The Venice Stories.
The Venice Stories. And there's a copy of that back there also. And that's a series of 15 short stories, all set in Venice, not intertwining in the way that Perryburg is. My wife Jane, hello Jane, how are you?
Howdy.
She first got to know my writing through the Venice Stories, really, and said that she just kept getting fascinated by them. So more and more I found there was, let me go back. Then I moved to Key West, Florida, and spent 15 years living there. And that's a literary community, and it's a lot of fiction. There's not much that's real there, and that was delightful. But it encouraged, I had a person who I was in a men's luncheon group with, who said, you know, you're right, you ought to write more. He said, you're right, I'll publish.
Whoa.
And he was a former editor of Reader's Digest and Saturday Evening Post, so I thought he might have the connections. So I wrote several short stories for him for the Murder in Key West series that came out each June through a seminar they had there. And then a series of books, Keeping Track of Crime, which are mystery novels all set on Amtrak trains. The protagonist in these stories is a retired New York City police detective.
Whoa.
Black and female.
Okay.
Very out of what you expect. And she is one wonderful, feisty woman who helps out the FBI when they can't figure the case out. So she travels trains. Her father was a railroad porter, and she knows what to watch out for and when things are going right and things are going wrong. So once I got that writing going.
Well, in Perryburg, you deal so much with various ethnicities
Right.
in upstate New York. Let me ask you first, how much of your Utica youth pours out of your pen when you're writing?
A lot. Very much. I'll tell you about those points. One of those, where's the truth? When you read the Union Station story, you'll meet two people in there, Bill and Gladys. And they meet at Union Station as in the middle of World War II. She's coming back as a nurse and getting off in Utica, and a young man is helping her get her bags off the train. And she announces to her father, who's picking her up, "Oh, I don't know, I'll never see that guy again." She was married to my father for 70-some years. So yes, I think they saw each other again. So that's one of those real ones.
Oh my heavens.
Yeah.
We in fiction, I say we, you draw from life, and you have encountered as a minister the different shades of life.
Oh yes.
From the light to the dark, that is the good, the bad, and the Republican. I didn't mean to get partisan. Jack, I apologize for that. That was so rude. Tell me about these people that you have created. I love the class reunion where, and how often has this happened? The former class president named Williams
Yes.
stands up in front of everybody. Please be seated. Everybody's seated, and then he goes, "Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance."
Right.
And, you know, at our age, rising for the Pledge of Allegiance is something of a taxing affair.
Yes.
But you capture moments like that so very beautifully. The class reunion is wonderful.
Well, there's a story about that. Jane had asked me to write another book. At one of her birthdays, said, "What do you want for a gift?" And she said, "I want you to write another book."
Oh.
And so I said, "Okay, I can do that. It's easier than finding the right piece of jewelry." But I needed to have the right story to start out with. And we were at a high school reunion together. It was my high school. And we were seated in the back. And it was one of those events. Blah, 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 blah. Remember the good old days and, all that sort of stuff. And I was thinking, what would make this more lively? What would shake this up? And that's where the reunion story came from, thinking about what could turn the tables at a high school reunion.
This is the bubble and fizz of fiction.
Yeah.
And you have it and express it in abundance in between the covers of your book. Was it great fun to sit and write?
Oh, it was. I should tell you my process. Someone asked me before, where do these stories come from? I don't know. I know once in a while some impetus that comes in. But I'll sit down and start putting the setting, and then the story seems to write itself. Something happens and it comes, and I don't want to get up from where I'm working because it's coming, it's flowing. And people come in, their characters get revealed. It's beyond me. I'm not quite sure where it comes from, but it's fun as it's happening. Is it fun was the question? Oh my, yes. Like, oh, I didn't see that coming. Wait a minute, I'm writing it, but I didn't see it coming. But that's how it feels all the time.
Pen to paper, typewriter, computer?
Computer. If we were doing pen to paper, we'd still be on page 1 trying to translate and decipher it.
I have seen your pen machine.
Yes, you have seen my pen.
It's dreadful.
Yes, it is.
To say.
I have to say, in school, we took a Palmer method penmanship. Does anybody remember the rules?
Yes.
And we were in a system where they did not allow ballpoint pens until we got to high school. We were still with nib pens and inkwells in the desk.
Oh my heavens.
Oh yeah. Miss McElmont would not allow anything less than that. So that meant we had ink stains on the floor and sawdust to cover it up and everything. I still have report cards with comments on my handwriting from grade school.
Why would you save such a thing?
Why would my mother save such a thing?
You have a real fondness for the name Joffrey. But and I like how you have insisted that Mr. Joffrey Gander,
Yes.
nicknamed Goose, insists on being called either Jeff or Goose. And I bring that up because your real name is Randolph, which is a wonderful, dignified name.
It is, but it's only used, as I say in my book, by my mother when I'm in real trouble. And that's when all the names come out, or when telemarketers are calling me.
Aha.
That's a good giveaway. Is Randolph there? Oh, what do you want to sell me now? That sort of thing. But yes, Jeffrey Goose Gander. For those, the story we're talking about is a story in which he meets his match in Rhonda Smith.
A black woman.
A black woman,
girl.
well mixed mulatto, because
Yes.
her mother is from Switzerland and her father is from Louisiana. And they meet in Perryburg High School, and they're very soon competitors. But they're more than competitors in the end. But they also have to deal with racism, they have to deal with all kinds of misunderstandings. And I was surprised how that story went too,
Well, that's a major element in anything we sit down to write, is that element of surprise. You look at a given chapter, for example, do you see the end of the chapter before you write it, or do you arrive at the end later?
I arrive at the end.
Aha.
I start out with some beginning, and then I let it have its freedom. I let it go where it wants to go, and it populates itself, and it informs itself. And of course, I have sometimes when it wanders off into the desert somewhere or into the woods upstate, and then I have to see if it'll come back again or not. But no, I do not know the ending, except in the reunion I knew where the ending was going to be.
Ah.
That one. I'd like to read something from one of my things.
Would
but
you do that?
I would.
Would you like to hear Randy read something?
Yeah.
Yes, of course. Of course you would. What are you going to say?
I got to make a comment on this. This is from the chapter entitled "The Seasons of Perryburg," and it's the winter chapter. Now, let me tell you a little bit about this whole chapter. It's a winter, a spring, a fall, a summer, a fall, and then another winter. The first one is in 1624. The next season, spring, will be in 1724. The next one will be 1824. If you know anything about upstate New York, you know what was going on in 1824. Building of a giant canal. 1924, and then 2024. But we're going back to 1624. And in those days, the area was populated by the, I've got to pronounce this properly now, Haudenosaunee. You know the Haudenosaunee?
Part of the Iroquois tribe.
No, it's the proper name for the people that were called Iroquois.
Oh.
Piece of information I discovered along the way. The name Iroquois was what was put on them by other tribes and basically means snake speakers.
Well, am I embarrassed?
No. The meaning of Haudenosaunee is people of the longhouse.
Aha.
So this is winter. Even in the midst of deep winter, the great longhouse was warm. It was with the warmth of many bodies, both human and animal, mixed with the smoky warmth of several fires. In the bitter cold outside, the savage winds that blew the snow into drifts higher than the longhouse rippled the layered skins of the house. These were times of survival, of communal care for one another. In the longhouse, privacy was an unknown quality. The space wide open from end to end afforded no separations. Just the previous winter, the whole community had surrounded Karawasi the Elder, one of the League of Leaders who would help the people of the Longhouse adjust to some of the new ways. As Karawasi lay dying, he gestured to Okwaha and Teakajinen. He had known the boy and girl from their birth. Now they were man and woman, having come of age by both ceremony and maturity in the past year. Okawaho and Teakajinen approached the old man they considered a spiritual grandfather. Kneeling down beside the pallet where Karawasi lay, they sought to hear the words he was saying. Against the whistle of the wind, they could not hear his words. Sensing this, Karawasi reached out and took Tewajanin's hand and placed it on Okwaho's hand. He then cupped his hand around them, joining their hands, and smiled. The two of them smiled as well. The elder had seen and understood their feelings for each other, and now he was ordaining and blessing their union. Before they could be joined in ceremony, however, Karawasi died. His death left a large hole in the fabric of the people, for his gentle and powerful spirit had guided them in so many ways. That grief held on to the people until the forest sugar maple moon rose bright and clear, and Karawasi's pathway to the future could be illuminated. At the next crescent of hope, the two, Okwaho and Teanajinen, were wed in a ceremony which remains to this day sacred and secret to the people. In the following month, with the field maker moon in the night sky, the first crops of the new year were planted. Okawaho and Teanajinen planted their own seed in the promise of spring. As grass and corn rose up, Teanajinen slowly grew. Now the couple counted not just the moons of planting and harvest, of hunting and fishing, but also the months of their child. By the next time that the moon announced the falling of branches amid the crushing ice of midwinter, Teojaninen began to feel her body making its preparations for birth. A special place in the longhouse was prepared for her, a little aside from the others. Sitting in a small circle, the women elders, all of whom had known childbirth themselves, provided a living wall of privacy. Their chanting timed her breaths. Their hands and hers shared strength, Their herbal drinks eased the pain. Outside, the winds were fierce, and the temperature was low. Snow did not just swirl outside, but drove itself against the longhouse like the roar of a waterfall. Its ferocity was met by the cries of Tia Janinen as she labored to fulfill the dying prophecy of Karawasi the Elder. Just before the dawn, the wind suddenly fell silent, as did Tarajulian. A hushed silence filled the whole longhouse, broken a second later by joyous first cries of new lungs. Tia Janinen wept tears of relief and joy. Akawahu and Tia Janinen had a son, a very healthy son. Given the direction and blessing they had received, the elder named that boy Karawasi, a new way of doing things. Onto his shoulders would fall the fate of the tribe to meet the future, but the future was already making its way toward him. And this was the winter of 1624, very near where Perryburg now stands.
I love it.
There is a poetic word for that. It is gorgeous. You have paid such a wonderful tribute to this rich Native American indigenous heritage that exists in New York. And I don't want us to leave Connecticut because we're connected by that heritage as well here in Connecticut with New York. But what a beautiful, beautiful tribute. And yes, the longhouses. In the John Wayne movies, the Native Americans live in teepees. That wasn't the case in New York.
Not in New York, not on most of the East Coast.
That's right.
There were longhouses in Virginia, too.
Well, absolutely, absolutely beautiful. What kind of research did you have to do to come up with this beautiful story?
Well, first I had to find out about the real name of the tribes. I had to research names of actual names that would be in either Mohawk, Oneida, or one of the Onondaga language. I had to research the names of the moons.
And I love the sugar maple moon.
Sugar maple,
Beautiful,
yes.
absolutely beautiful reference.
And what would have been life like in those eras? That it was not any. This is like living with all your relatives in one room. And at the most intimate of times, it was the elder women that provided the privacy for the mother giving birth. I mean, this is community. This is what people used to know about.
And it was the respect and power of the woman in the
Yes.
tribe that is emphasized.
Right.
Beautiful, beautifully captured,
Thank you.
beautifully captured. How long did it take you to write Perryburg?
A couple of years.
And all
In birth and spurts, and then go back and go back. Go back. I want to go back to what I have to research. There's one mention in here which is on the story about the river. Oneida, the Oneida River. Do you know what the word Oneida means in the language of the natives? It means river. So the colonists came in and said, "What is that?" And they said, "Oneida." "Oh, the Oneida River." That's the river. Or it could be water, like Oswego means water. So you have, Oswego River, again, water river. So many misunderstandings in the naming of things.
And this is a biblical order to name things.
Yeah.
And the Native Americans took that seriously, not based on the Bible, but based on their heritage and their ancestry.
And their intimate relationship to Earth. They knew that they and Earth were not separate, that there was a flow of continuity, no divide. There isn't a sacred and a profane, it's all one. So they needed to know the name of it, and its name was often its function, because to have a name without a function is folly.
It makes no sense.
Yeah.
You quote Ralph Waldo Emerson.
I do, yes.
And
The only quote that's real in the book.
Understood. And one of the few actual people. You do mention Joseph R. Biden.
I do.
Okay, bless you for that. And you mentioned Ralph Waldo Emerson. He said, "Nothing is at last sacred but the integrity of your own mind."
That's right.
He was a Unitarian minister for a
Yeah.
while. You are a Unitarian minister.
Yeah, I was active for 50 years,
Yeah.
yes.
And what effect did Emerson have upon you and your ministry?
Well, Emerson had a big effect on me before I went in the ministry. I read his Self-Reliance, the essay being quoted, and to me it just struck at the core of my being. You know, in the time growing up in the 50s and into the 60s, when fitting in, being part of obedient crowd and all that, was not where my soul was, my spirit. And then I read Emerson and I go, oh, someone lived before me who thought like I did. And Henry David Thoreau, too. Those I read and I've kept all my life a copy of Walden with me.
Me too.
Yeah. I should say, when I went to Venice, I could only take, in those days, it was way before e-books and stuff, I could take 5 books in my luggage. So I took Walden, I took a Walt Whitman compendium,
Oh,
I took a Mary Oliver new and poems.
listen to the size.
Yeah, I know, we're hearing this, yeah. You can see where I go on that. I took, what were the other 2?
The Birth of Snow.
Oh, that hasn't been written yet, Ira, but it is available down at the Books on the Common. Absolutely, wonderful. So yes, Emerson had a great effect, and for several reasons. One, he did his famous divinity school address to the graduates at Harvard Divinity School, in which he basically told them, stop acting like ministers. He said, you know, I was in a service once where outside the snow was lightly falling and we could see it, and inside, what the preacher was saying had no relevance to anything on earth whatsoever. He said there was more being preached outside than inside. He was not invited back to Harvard Divinity School. And also when his church, the second church in Boston, insisted upon a certain interpretation of communion, which was a little more formal than he wanted, he said, you know, I can go practice by myself.
Yep.
And that's when he went. So I understand that. There have been tempting times to tell people, I need to go off by myself. But then I got working for most of that career with children. And children don't vex you in that way. They vex you in other ways. But they are so open and inquiring, and they don't care about what's been set down before. They want to know what's coming ahead. They want to know who they will become. And so most of my ministry was with young people.
And you were never tempted or persuaded to leave the ministry, as Emerson was in his mind.
I would periodically be tempted, but a friend of mine told me early on, at any point have something else you think you might do, and if ever that thing becomes more important, go do it.
Ooh.
And I never got to that point. And of course, I'd done other things in my life. My degree was in physics and sociology, and I worked for Eastman Kodak in research in Rochester. I was a railroad engineer with the New York Central Railroad, so I had some other things I had fun with.
Well, I want to, lest you think, if we're talking theology and the ministry here, lest you think that Perryburg, an autobiography of a city, is all Sunday school. And I'm alluding to the oblate, is that how you, oblate?
Oblate.
Oblate
The oblate.
chapter. In
What?
which, but in the wall,
I should explain, the oblate was a building formed by Abel and Tate, a big apartment house that had fallen on lesser, better times. And so it was going to be renovated. Go ahead, what you were going to
well,
say.
and the two people whose names were combined to form oblate.
Yeah.
Anyway, I just want you to know this, and I don't think we have any really young people here. Good. There are some pretty hubba love letters discovered in the walls of this building.
There are.
I'm blushing even asking.
Yeah, there's some, in a little box in the wall as the renovations are happening. There's a box that's found. There's also something else found, which was a secret passageway. And that was a secret passageway so two adjoining apartments could have communion with each other, shall we say. And I'll let you read the book to find out why.
Such a theological word, so
Yes.
you can have communion with each other. Yes, wonderful. When you pick a book from a shelf, what do you pick to read, Randy?
I usually will pick a book, open it to the middle, and see if the first paragraph or several that I see captivate me in some way. And it's an interesting mix of what will do it. It doesn't have to be fact, it could be factual fiction, nonfiction, whatever. It needs to be, the meter of the sentences needs to be my rhythm of how I think. You know, sometimes you read people and how they're writing is not the way you think. Another way is the print big enough? That's an aging problem. Dark enough. Is the book too heavy? Increasingly that becomes an interesting issue of big tone. But I want something that grabs me, both where I am and where I might be, within those first few pages I read. So it could be the beginning of the book or the middle. If you can't get me within a couple pages, then I'll put it back and go again.
Reader first and then writer.
Yeah.
It emerges from that. Do we have any questions?
I'm sure we
for
must have
Randy?
some questions.
Yeah, we must. We want to give you that opportunity. Yes, Martha.
How long is a long house?
How long is a long house?
I mean, I'm just thinking.
Well, they can be up 60 feet and longer.
Okay.
You know, we're not talking, wide by 30 feet or so. So it's not massive.
Right.
Because structurally you have the issues otherwise.
And it's one story.
One story.
And how were they constructed?
They were constructed with wood frame and hide covering generally,
Okay.
multiple layers, with flaps over the top that could be opened to let smoke out, but if it was really raining or snowing, the smoke stayed in. Yeah, it was a smoky lot, yes. But remember, you didn't need a lot of fire if you had a large number of people in that space.
Yeah.
And animals. This was cozy time. It was survival time, too.
I like also in the Seasons chapter, you use the name Jebediah.
Yes.
And whenever we go back in time in American fiction or history, there's got to be a Jebediah.
Oh, there has to be a
It's a
Jebediah.
rule.
It's a rule, that's
Yeah.
right, yes.
It's an unavoidable rule. Yeah. Tell me about the names you chose for your characters. They're wonderful.
Well,
Tinsdale.
Tinsdale, William Tinsdale, the reprobate from England, whose wonderful place outside, he couldn't live in the city, he hated it down there. So he built this place outside of town as a trading post, and he was a good guy. He was on the wrong side of things in England because, in fact, in those days, almost everyone was on the wrong side of things in England, unless you were part of the aristocracy, so royalty. But here, he treated everyone equally, traded with First Nations people and also with the colonists. He didn't care if they spoke English or German or Swedish or native language. He treated them fairly, which was not true in the city that was developing. There were strict social and moral codes. So he became sort of this outpost people could go to who were outcast from the downtown post. But then what he established, of course, became an inn, and then became something more. I'm going to leave that for the story, for those of you who read it. Yes. Log Cabin Inn.
What about your writing process? Do you draw upon a diary? Have you written notes down through the years and they served you?
I haven't written it down a lot, but it's all up here, and it's slowly fading. Anyone have that issue? Yeah, no. But I've scrapped some paper in various places that are now on the computer, little note clips and other stuff that I will refer to. But in the actual writing, it's really sitting down and seeing what gels. And then I go do research on a number of things. I had to go to a lot of old maps to find out where, in fact, Perryburg was, because it had to be a place where nothing was. You see, there is no Perryburg. You can look it up on the map and you will not find it. But on the other hand, if you look it up in your heart and mind, you might find it. It's sort of a, what's that name in Scottish?
Oh, Brigadoon.
Brigadoon. It's sort of an American Brigadoon,
Yeah.
but it's not quite at the upper level of Brigadoon.
I disagree.
Okay.
It's a Brigadoon, and it is wondrous. You know, speaking of Brigadoon, I remember driving through Ohio. Shelley and I were one time on the highway, and I noticed a street sign, an exit for a place called Weeklyville. And I'm thinking, wow, Weeklyville, that's kind of like Brigadoon, only more often.
Oh, wow.
That's how it struck me. That's how it struck me. You know, I had a minister friend. I don't mean to go theological on you here, Randy.
This is getting to be like a board meeting here.
I know, forgive me. But I remember a minister visited our family, and I was a little kid, and he said, you know, when I go into a house, I always look for the family Bible. And if I see it sitting on the bookcase and it's nice and neat and in wonderful condition, I think, ooh, not good. What I want to see is a Bible that's all wrinkled and the covers are torn and there has been much paging through it. That will be the fate of Perryburg, an autobiography of the city. My copy, already, I have not defaced it, but I have loved it by making notes about it in anticipation of our conversation. And I say that as a tribute to you and your
Thank
talent.
you.
Well,
Thank you.
for writing the book. We have other books on the horizon?
Well, there's, of course, Perryburg, the sequel. You have to do that for Hollywood, you know.
Yeah, of course.
And the prequel. No, I'm halfway through another mystery novel involving a body off of a train just over the California border from Arizona, in which the person who's found on the tracks appears a woman, but there's no woman missing from the train. So what we're talking about, and the FBI has to figure out where the murder took place, whether it was Arizona or California, because there are different capital punishment laws and transgender issues, and it all gets into that kind of stuff. So that's another side of me that's going on.
Is it hard to find the time to do all of these things?
It is. Being retired takes a lot of time. Do you agree? You get up in the morning and then you get to evening dinner, and that happens almost immediately. And you think, well, I didn't get to everything I want to. But over the summer, well, I'll be up in Maine. I can sit down at the table, look at the water, and I can write for an hour or two. And it's easy to do there.
And you also frequently visit your childhood home or area.
Right.
Tell me about that. How does that affect you when you go there?
Well, Jane and I were just there this week. Jane is laughing. Jane and I drove up there to my place in the woods in upstate.
You sent a beautiful picture of the trees.
It's on the lake, and we went down to the city of Utica. Yeah, Jane was freezing there. Not until Wednesday, then it was much warmer. But went down to the city, and we made our obligatory visit to Union Station. Well, chapter here about Union Station. And this is a giant palace of a monument to the New York Central Railroad, built back in 1914, and still totally intact with the marble pillars and the gilded ceilings and all that. I don't know if anybody remember they had the stations where you had wooden benches, they were
Yes.
curved,
Sure.
and there were radiators behind them. So in the winter, the benches were warm. They circled the radiators. Well, they're all still there, all in beautiful shape. And the station still has a barber shop that functions, the only Amtrak station with a barber shop. It has a restaurant in it. It's like how life used to be. So part of me is the city changes, the area changes, but part of it captures what had been too.
What do you achieve in writing Perryburg? What does it for Randolph Becker? What do you achieve?
I got a lot of new friends that I think about a lot, and those are the characters that are in the book. We talk about it. Their stories keep coming up. You know, I think of, oh, you know, Rhonda and Goose would love to hear that. That sort of thing. They're there. They're part of my life now. These created characters continue to create in me and give back because their insights, I see the world through some of their eyes. I see the world through the eyes of the First Nation people that are in the book. I see it through the troubled eyes. I see it through the yearning eyes hoping to move to the suburbs. I see it through the immigrant eyes who are hoping that Perryburg will be a place they can settle. They keep giving back to me. That's why. Do we see if there are other questions out here?
Oh, no.
No, okay. Yes.
Who has a question?
Jack.
I don't know if it's a question or a comment. First of all, thank you, Randy, for a great book. About very dog ear. And I made a valiant attempt to get to the end of it, 40 pages short. Ironically, I ended on the part that you quoted. That's where, and it was a wonderful experience. And I always, when I read something, I try to see.
Jack, why don't you, here, use my phone. So everyone's about that.
Yeah. I try to see the bigger picture, with a more expansive picture of what this book is trying to tell me. And at first I thought it was quite straightforward. You know, every place has a heart and a soul, and it can talk to you. I remember going back to my high school at my 50th reunion, and the school was not the same. It was like, you know, our town. You can't go home. You can never go home. But what I gained from the book is that, yes, places have a heart and soul, but they grow, and they evolve to something good or something not as good as it used to be, and the world keeps changing and changing. But those stories that are in the walls and in the secret passageways, they live on forever. So.
And Jack is from Tonawanda. Speaking of upstate New York.
And not North Tonawanda.
No, Tonawanda.
I will have to comment on that too. I think when you get to the final chapter, you will see your truth spoken to about the city. I also want to comment on the writing process.
Yes.
You know, for 50 years, I wrote a 2,000-word essay every week.
Your sermon?
Sermon, yeah. So writing was a certain discipline, it was a certain length, a certain style, until I got down to Key West. And there I got involved with a lot of the historic black churches, and that style is very different than white Protestant preaching. A lot more lively, a lot more...
Ad-libbing.
Ad-libbing, repetitive phrases brought to a climax. If you think of Dr. King's I Have a Dream speech, that's what I'm talking about, in which you make the point emotionally as well as cognitively and rationally. And that changed that. I stopped writing sermons. I started preaching them. So that was a revelation to me. But that constant activity that I was writing, if it wasn't a sermon, it was a piece for the newsletter, it was a piece for the newspaper where it was some kind of op-ed piece. So writing has always been there. It was just part of the discipline of my life.
Can I ask, was there a moment in your life when you said to yourself, I have a book in me, and I'm going to write that book. Was there that moment?
There was, and that was recently when Jane said, I want you to write a book, and I said, yeah, I think I got one for you.
Well, but you had books before that.
Well, before that, I never had the time to get to them. You know, you have these dreams, and then you start out in the beginning of your career, you're the low person on the ecclesiastical totem pole, and so you get all the work and none of the glory. And then you move up till you're the single entrepreneur of a business that ought to have at least 3 partners, but you're the only one there. And then you start having children, and that sort of takes away a small amount of time if you care about them at all. And then you discover that because of relationship to the person you're married to, you're going to have to be the room parent for all the class grades for your kids and be a PTA president and even a Girl Scout leader I was at one point because my daughter needed a Girl Scout troop. You often don't have the time for all that writing, so you store it up.
Well, and the book is comprised of heroes and rascals, and I like one of the heroes that I want to mention. It's the fire chief, Bill Lennon.
Now that I have to mention, Bill Lennon was the actual fire chief I knew as a child.
Was that his name?
That was his name.
We had a fireman in Little Valley, I swear to God. His name, the fireman's name was Buffy Burnmark. Jack, he was a fireman.
He was meant to be. He was meant to be.
Well, yeah, Buffy Burnmark. Anyway, so Fire Chief Bill Lennon is talking to the City Council Budget Committee, and they're being a little bit holding back on funds, and he said, ooh, it would be a shame if we couldn't save one of your assets because we lacked the equipment. Well, what do you know? It was passed.
Yes.
And everything was right. That's a lovely encapsulated moment that is a part of the bigger picture. But you're an author, you're a writer, you're an embracer of humanity, and it exists in Perryburg. And I have a confession to make too, and I called you about this.
Yep.
I read the preface, and then I Googled the person who's quoted in the preface. Well, she doesn't exist. And I'm such a knucklehead, I thought she was a real person. And then you had to say, I'm so embarrassed about that.
No. But I warn people when you get the book, except there are a few people here, but the entire book is fiction. I'm going to want to. I thought as a device I would write something that appeared to be a research book. It was researched in a way.
Of course it
But
is. Sure.
Not the way, I'm trying to make a point that's not about the facts of it again, but about the truth of it. And so the preface, I invented her. On the back, there's a quote back, if you look at the back of the book. Oh no, it's not on this copy. This is the hardcover. There's one that, I have it on there. It's one of my favorites.
Give it back.
I will, I'll give it back. Thank you. Time travel is possible, and Randy Becker's new work, Perryburg, is the vehicle. The usual barriers of space and time are removed in these stories when real people refuse to be captured by unnatural restraints.
Wow.
Howard Troggett said that. My great uncle has been dead for 50-some years, but he was very helpful in the writing of the back page.
Well, Howard was always very proud of you, as I recall.
Yes.
And the only person so far, the only living being we've not talked about is Buster the dog.
Oh, Buster the dog, yeah, well, there's a bunch of Buster dogs, yes, and
A composite.
composites,
A composite.
yes.
Okay.
So a number of them are composite people too. But also, I want to read just one little thing at the end here. It comes in the epilogue. Very short paragraph. The epilogue. In the spring of 2023, the first chapter of this book, Exodus, was published as a standalone story in the print and e-journal of the Rust Belt Quarterly, that fine publication of Mohawk University.
Sorry, forgive me.
In the aftermath of its circulation, many people shared their thoughts. Some wrote to ask why it was claimed to be about Perryburg when it was clearly about their city of origin, memory, or residence. To them, the story must have been located somewhere else, in New York, Pennsylvania, West Virginia, Southern Ohio, or a smattering of other places. Something about Perryburg was emblematic of so many other small cities and towns.
Amen.
Yeah. And that's what I wanted to capture. I've lived in upstate New York, or spent extended time in Albany, Schenectady, Utica, Syracuse,
Skinny up.
Rochester, Buffalo. Sounds like New York Central Railroad, I know. Erie, Ashtabula, Cleveland, Toledo, South Bend, Elkhart, and Chicago.
Ooh.
They're all this city. You visit any of them. What, Jane?
You never told me this.
We'll have to introduce you two after the conversation today.
Well, that was when I was working for the railroad. I worked on the New York Central Main Line. And all those, you get in those cities, and all these places, Perryburg is all those places. It's also Binghamton. It's also Poughkeepsie. It's Danbury,
Salamanca.
and East Salamanca. It's also Waterbury. It's Bridgeport. It's Worcester.
How did you come up with the name Perryburg? Is there a significance there?
There isn't, other than I began somehow. There's a Perry, New York, out near Buffalo.
There's also a Perrysburg.
There's a Perrysburg.
Perrysburg, near Buffalo.
But so I started looking to see if there was any Perryburg in the United States, and there isn't. There's Perryburgs, a lot of places, Ohio and other, with the S. I thought, now I've got it. You can't pin down where the city is,
Oh, cool.
because you've got to make it your own. It's got to be something that you're inspired to be.
Well, I had the feeling as I read it, well, I've been there. I know that street. I know Mohawk Street.
Yep.
And I know Main Street. Why is it called Main Street? What about South Salem?
Yeah.
Have you been on Main Street in South Salem? It's an odd Main Street in South Salem. But again, yes, I understood the streets. I've been there. I've been on
there.
those streets. Any other questions?
Yeah.
Oh, good.
Nancy.
Yes, Nancy.
So,
Want to come get the microphone?
no, that's okay.
Okay.
I'm dying to know, what motivated you to write that chapter on the high school reunion? Because it kind of took me, I was taken aback by it. And I only know you from poetry class. I was kind of surprised, and I was wondering what.
She's asking, where did the reunion story come from? We were taken back by it. I'm going to tell you a little story related to that before I get to my part of it. Those of you who know Michael Lancaster at Founders Hall, he's read the book. He said he spent a sleepless night after that chapter.
It was disturbing.
It is.
That's part of its charm.
But I put it away because it would be the most extreme thing to happen at a high school reunion. And yet, for so many women in America, some piece of that story was true.
Yeah.
The pain of it, all of it that's in there, and the quiet grace with which she pulls off the revenge, in a way. Maybe you don't agree it's a quiet grace, but
She dropped a bomb.
well, she got you. You need to, if you haven't gotten the book and read it, you need to read that chapter. And, only that, but there's a lot of hurt, and I think that's true for. If there was one person that experienced it, it would be too much hurt, and I know it's more than one person in our country who have experienced that sort of thing. Other questions? Yes.
What's your favorite topic to write about?
My favorite topic to write about? Well, one thought is always travel, other places that I've been to. I've got one of my books back there on Venice travel. Railroads are always fun. You need to know, I grew up in a railroad family. My father worked for the New York Central Railroad for 41 years. One of my brothers just retired after 37 years with Norfolk Southern Railway. I worked for the railroad. Another brother worked for New York Central in Michigan. Another brother worked for the Rail Passenger Association in Washington. So we're a railroad family. Sorry, Jane. So, but to put stories, not, just to say, well, this was what you see at milepost such and such, wouldn't do it. And that's why the mystery, it's what goes on in the life of trains. A side that just came to me. At one point, I was going across the country on the train to San Francisco, to Emeryville, and I met a man in the lounge car. Turned out that he had been one of the biographers of the Beat poets, and knew Bukowski and all these himself, and wrote Ferlinghetti and all this. And we had a wonderful conversation with it. All of a sudden he said, "My blood sugar is going down." And they weren't open for any sales at that point, so I went back to my room and got all the provisions I had brought out and spread a lunch thing out on the table, and he brought over 2 other people, and we just dined there for hours telling stories out of the 50s and 60s.
Oh, how wonderful.
And that sort of get written up someday, I should,
That's what happens on a train.
I also like to write about hope. The other thing, I told Ira I had an awakening about the book about a week ago. Someone asked me, so what kind of book is it? And I was thinking, not love story, I said it's a love story. The whole book is actually a love story. It's not only a love story about Perryburg, there's so much love in it. That couple in the longhouse. Even the woman in the reunion, and I can't give away too much of it, but anyway, I think there is. Rhonda and Goose. Bill and Gladys. The African-American railway worker who sees the refugee, Roosevelt, who sees the refugee arriving on the train. All these people who find ways to find connection in a world in which disconnection is so common.
You remind me of the Hungarian refugees who came in 1956 when the Hungarian Revolution did occur. It's just woven wonderfully, Randy, with history, and that gives it its truth, and some of its fact, but it gives it its gravitas too. And there is humor. I'm laughing, but there's gravitas.
I hope that is, yeah.
Yes, most
And
assuredly.
that, the Hungarian refugees, my side of it was that when they arrived in town, our kitchen table disappeared. We got a new one, but the old one went to the refugees. And my mother's treadle sewing machine, the old Singer, went to them. And several other things in our household went because they got here through the hardest means possible. And so we could help them out in any way. That was just what I grew up with. That's how you were toward other people. And that's a story underneath Perryburg, too. That maybe you're at war with each other, but when the going gets tough, you're there together. Which I think is the story of any good town.
Well, I think it is a love poem about Perryburg and the people who people it. You people, your book, just like History Peoples a City. And I thank you for writing it. I thank you for publishing it. And I thank you for letting it be a part of our lives. It's going to stay there in the heart, and we'll keep thumbing through it, whether it's physically or emotionally in our heart. You've given us a great gift.
Thank you, Aaron.
Thank you. Thank you, and thank you.
Yeah. Before we get to other words from the library, thank you to the library, of course, for this happening. I want to note that in the back, there's some refreshments on the side. There's water in the chest there. There's also some stuff from the cake box, who made their presence known. If you don't know the cake box in Ridgefield, you should. And there's also some stuff from the Mohawk Street Bakery in Perryburg. That's back there, which you might want to try out. So we thank both Mohawk Street Bakery and Cake Box.
Well, thank you guys, thank you gentlemen again so much for this wonderful conversation. I hope everybody had a wonderful time tonight. So books again are available in the back, and
I'll go sign.
Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you.